The Galactic Council had existed for over 3 million years, governing thousands of species across the spiral arms of the Milky Way. In all that time, there had been exactly one rule that every civilization learned before they even qualified for membership: never make humans angry. It wasn't written in any official document. It didn't appear in the Council's constitution or in any treaty, but every ambassador, every trader, every explorer knew it. The rule had been passed down through generations like a whispered warning in the dark. Commander Zethkri of the Vorthan Empire had always thought it was nonsense. Humans were small, soft creatures who lived barely a century. They had no natural weapons, no thick hides, no venomous stings. When they first appeared on the galactic stage 200 years ago, they seemed almost pathetically weak compared to the other species. The Vorthans, by contrast, stood nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most energy weapons. They had conquered dozens of worlds through sheer military might. Their empire stretched across 4 star systems, and they were hungry for more. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Claw, Zethkri studied the tactical display showing the human colony of New Geneva. The planet was rich in rare minerals that the Vorthon Empire desperately needed for their expansion. The humans had refused all attempts at negotiation, claiming the planet held some sort of sentimental value. Sentimental value? Zethkri clicked his mandibles in what passed for Vorthon laughter. These soft creatures attach emotions to rocks and dirt. His tactical officer, a younger Vorthan named Keftal, shifted nervously. "Sir, perhaps we should reconsider." "The old warnings about humans are superstitions spread by cowards," Zethkri cut him off. "Look at them, Keftal. They have no fleet in this system, no orbital defenses, just a small colony of farmers and miners. We could take this world in a matter of hours." The tactical display showed the human settlement clearly. Roughly 50,000 colonists lived in scattered communities across the planet's surface. Their technology seemed primitive compared to Vorthon standards. A few small cargo ships moved between the planet and a modest space station in orbit. "But the Council prohibitions," Keftal began. "The Council is weak," Zethkri snarled. "They speak of laws and treaties while the galaxy stagnates. The Vorthan Empire will show them what true strength looks like." What Zethkri didn't know was that New Geneva wasn't just any human colony. It was the birthplace of Admiral Sarah Chen, the woman who had led humanity's first successful defense against the Zarethan horde 30 years earlier. More importantly, it was where she had chosen to retire after her service. The colonists weren't just farmers and miners either. Many were veterans of humanity's various conflicts, people who had come to New Geneva seeking peace after years of war. They had built their quiet lives on this world, far from the bustle of the inner systems. As Zethkri's fleet moved into attack position, a message was transmitted from the planet's surface. An elderly human woman appeared on the communication screen, her gray hair pulled back severely and her blue eyes sharp with intelligence. "I am Sarah Chen, Colonial Administrator of New Geneva," she said calmly. "I'm sending this message to warn you that you are making a terrible mistake. This colony is under the protection of the Terran Federation. I strongly advise you to withdraw immediately." Zethkri studied the human's face. She looked fragile, ancient by human standards. "I am Commander Zethkri of the Vorthan Empire. Your planet now belongs to us. Surrender immediately and your people will be relocated safely to other worlds." Chen's expression didn't change. "Commander, you clearly don't understand the situation. I'm going to give you one more chance to reconsider. Leave this system now and this incident will be forgotten." The arrogance astounded Zethkri. This tiny, elderly creature was threatening him. A commander of the mighty Vorthan fleet, he had brought 12 heavy cruisers and over 10,000 warriors to this backwater system. "You have 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures," he told Chen. "After that, we will take the planet by force." Chen nodded slowly. "I see. In that case, Commander, you should know that I've just sent a priority message to Earth Command. They should receive it in about 6 hours. The connection ended, leaving Zethkri staring at a blank screen. He turned to his officers, noting their worried expressions. "She's bluffing," he declared. "Even if she sent a message, it would take the human fleet weeks to reach this system. We'll have claimed the planet and fortified it long before they arrive." But as his fleet moved closer to New Geneva, Zethkri couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The humans on the planet below seemed strangely calm for people about to be invaded. There was no panic, no desperate attempts to flee. Instead, The colonists appeared to be methodically preparing for something. What he didn't realize was that Sarah Chen had done more than send a message to Earth Command. She had also activated something that hadn't been used in decades, the emergency beacon system that connected every human world across the galaxy. Within minutes of her transmission, every human fleet commander, every colonial defense force, and every merchant captain in space knew that New Geneva was under threat. More importantly, they knew who was threatening it. Admiral Marcus Webb was reviewing supply reports aboard the TNS Retribution when the priority alert came through. The massive dreadnought was stationed near the border with Altarian space, conducting routine patrols. Webb had been looking forward to a quiet shift, maybe catching up on some reading. The emergency beacon changed everything. "Sir, we're receiving a code black transmission," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with urgency. "It's from New Geneva." Webb's blood ran cold. Code black meant an unprovoked attack on a human colony. It hadn't been used in over a decade. "Put it through." Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main screen, and Webb felt his chest tighten. He had served under Chen during the Zarethan War, had seen her lead impossible battles with calm determination. If Sarah was calling for help, the situation was serious. "All Terran forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. New Geneva is under immediate threat from a Vorthan fleet. They have demanded our surrender and given us 1 hour to evacuate. I am activating emergency protocols." "Chen out." The bridge fell silent. Webb stared at the screen for a long moment, his mind processing what he had just heard. Someone was threatening Sarah Chen. Someone was threatening the hero of Kepler Station, the woman who had saved millions of human lives. "Navigation," Webb said quietly, his voice carrying an edge that made his crew straighten. "Plot a course for New Geneva. Maximum burn." "Sir, that's 8 days at full speed," the navigator replied. "Then we'd better get started." "Communications. Send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them what's happening and that the Retribution is en route." Webb paused, considering his next words carefully. "Also send a general broadcast to all Terran forces. Any ship within range of New Geneva is to respond immediately." What Webb didn't know was that his wasn't the only ship receiving the beacon. Across human space, captains were making the same decision. The cargo hauler Prairie Wind was 3 systems away when Captain Lisa Rodriguez received the alert. Without hesitation, she changed course, even though her ship carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. Commander James Park was leading a small patrol group near the Centauri cluster when the beacon reached him. His 3 destroyers were supposed to be investigating reports of pirate activity, but New Geneva took priority. Everything took priority when it came to Sarah Chen. On the frontier world of Harmony, Colonel David Kim was training new recruits when the alert came through. Within an hour, he had loaded 2 companies of Marines onto the fastest transport he could find and was burning toward New Geneva. But the response wasn't limited to military forces. Across the galaxy, human civilians were making their own preparations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working at a research station near the Galactic Rim, began frantically trying to contact her brother, who lived on New Geneva. Merchant Captain Tommy Sullivan diverted his entire convoy, knowing that his cargo of medical supplies might be needed. On Earth itself, Fleet Admiral Catherine Hayes was in the middle of a budget meeting when her aide burst into the room with the news. The aide had never seen the Admiral move so fast. Within minutes, Hayes was in the Situation Room, coordinating the largest human military response in 30 years. "How many ships do we have within a week's travel of New Geneva?" she demanded. Her tactical officer was frantically checking deployment charts. "At last count, approximately 400 vessels of various classes. But ma'am, most of those are cargo ships, civilian transports, maybe some light patrol craft. I don't care if they're flying garbage scows," Hayes snapped. "If they can mount a weapon or carry Marines, they're part of this operation. What about our heavy units?" "The Retribution is closest, followed by the carrier group under Admiral Torres. The 3rd Fleet is conducting exercises near Tau Ceti, but they're 12 days out at best." Hayes nodded grimly. "Send orders to Admiral Torres. I want her carrier group at New Geneva yesterday. And contact Admiral Torres personally. Tell her that Sarah Chen is in danger." The mention of Chen's name sent a ripple through the room. Everyone knew the stories. How she had held Kepler Station against impossible odds. How she had led the breakthrough at the Battle of New Sydney. How she had personally led boarding parties against Zarethan hive ships. knowing that one mistake would mean death. But it wasn't just her military record that mattered. Sarah Chen represented something more to humanity. She was the grandmother who had sat in congressional hearings fighting for veteran benefits. She was the woman who had given up a comfortable retirement on Earth to help build a new world for people who needed a fresh start. Meanwhile, at New Geneva, the colonists were far from helpless. As Zethkri's fleet approached, the seemingly peaceful farmers and miners were revealing their true nature. Weapons caches that had been hidden for decades were being opened. Former military personnel were dusting off old skills. Marcus Thompson, who had been quietly running a hydroponic farm for the past 15 years, was suddenly Colonel Thompson again, coordinating defensive positions with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before. His crops could wait. The Vorthans couldn't. Sarah Chen stood in the colony's command center, watching the tactical displays with calm professionalism. Around her, the staff moved with quiet efficiency. These weren't panicked civilians. These were professionals who had found peace but hadn't forgotten their training. "Ma'am, the Vorthon fleet is assuming attack formation," reported her tactical officer, a young woman named Jennifer Hayes, daughter of Fleet Admiral Catherine Hayes. "Expected time to surface bombardment?" Chen asked. 37 minutes at current approach speed," Chen nodded. "Then we hold for 36 minutes. Make sure all civilian shelters are sealed, and that our surface batteries are ready." What the Vorthans still didn't understand was that new Geneva's primitive technology was actually a carefully crafted deception. The colonists had chosen to live simply, but they hadn't chosen to live defenseless. Hidden beneath the agricultural domes were military-grade shield generators. The mining equipment could be rapidly converted into makeshift weapons. The modest space station contained enough firepower to give even a Vorthon cruiser serious problems. But more importantly, they had time. And with each passing minute, more human ships were burning toward New Geneva at maximum speed. The hour deadline passed with mechanical precision. Commander Zethkri watched his chronometer count down the final seconds, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The humans had shown no signs of surrender or evacuation. Now he would demonstrate Vorthon superiority to the entire galaxy. "All ships commence bombardment," he ordered. "Target their primary settlements first. Show them the cost of defying the Vorthon Empire." 12 heavy cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts and fusion missiles streaked toward the planet's surface, enough firepower to level mountains. Zethkri expected to see explosions, devastation, the quick collapse of human resistance. Instead, brilliant blue energy shields flared to life around every major settlement. The Vorthon weapons struck the barriers and dissipated harmlessly. Emergency lights began flashing on Zethkri's bridge as his sensors registered massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. "Impossible," he hissed. Intelligence reported no significant defenses. His tactical officer was frantically recalibrating sensors. "Sir, I'm reading military-grade shield generators at 17 locations. Also detecting what appears to be concealed weapon emplacements." Before Zethkri could respond, the planet fired back. Energy beams lanced up from hidden batteries, striking 2 of his cruisers. The Vorthon ships staggered under the unexpected assault, their shields flashing as they absorbed the incoming fire. "Return fire. Concentrate on those weapon positions," Zethkri commanded. But the human defenses were more sophisticated than anything the Vorthons had encountered from a colony world. The weapon batteries were heavily shielded and began moving as soon as they fired, sliding along underground rails to new positions. When the Vorthon return fire struck their previous locations, it hit empty ground. On the planet's surface, Sarah Chen watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "How long can we maintain this defensive posture?" she asked. "Shield generators are operating at 60% capacity," reported her engineering chief, a grizzled veteran named Frank Morrison. "We can keep this up for maybe 6 hours before we risk burnout." "That should be enough," Chen replied, though privately she wondered if help would arrive in time. The Vorthons had brought more ships than expected, and even New Geneva's hidden defenses couldn't hold out indefinitely against such overwhelming numbers. In space above, Zethkri was discovering that conquering humans was far more difficult than his intelligence reports had suggested. His fleet was now engaged in a full-scale battle with what was supposed to be a defenseless colony. Worse, his ships were taking damage. "Sir," The Razor's Edge reports shield failure on her port side, his communications officer announced. And the Iron Talon has lost primary weapons. Zethkri's mandibles clicked in frustration. This was taking too long. Every minute they spent fighting this colony was another minute for potential human reinforcements to arrive. Signal the ground assault ships. Begin landing operations immediately. 2 Vorthon troop transports broke away from the main fleet, their holds filled with crack assault troops. Each soldier stood over 2 meters tall, armed with energy weapons and wearing powered armor that could punch through most barriers. But as the transports descended toward the planet's surface, New Geneva revealed another surprise. The space station that had appeared so modest suddenly came alive with weapons fire. Hidden missile tubes opened along its hull, unleashing a devastating barrage against the approaching troop ships. One transport exploded immediately, its hull cracked open like an eggshell. The second managed to deploy its troops, but they landed scattered and disorganized, many of their drop pods destroyed during the chaotic descent. The Vorthon soldiers who did make it to the ground found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The human colonists fought with a combination of military precision and desperate fury that caught the invaders completely off guard. Former Sergeant Major Williams, who had been running a small cafe in New Geneva's main settlement, was suddenly back in combat mode. He led a squad of fellow veterans in a devastating ambush that wiped out an entire Vorthon patrol. The aliens' superior size and strength meant nothing when humans refused to fight fair. But the real shock came when the first human reinforcements arrived. The merchant vessel Lucky Strike dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, followed closely by the destroyer Vigilant and a converted cargo hauler called New Dawn. They weren't much against a Vorthon fleet, but they sent a clear message. Humans were coming. Captain Rodriguez of the Prairie Wind arrived next, her cargo ship bristling with improvised weapons. She had stopped at 3 different systems on her way to New Geneva, picking up volunteer fighters and whatever military hardware she could find. Her ship now carried 2 squads of colonial marines and enough missiles to make the Vorthons think twice. Zethkri watched the growing collection of human ships with growing unease. His tactical display showed more contacts approaching from multiple directions. Most were civilian vessels, but some were clearly military craft, and there were more hyperspace signatures appearing every few minutes. "Sir, we're detecting additional ships incoming," his sensor officer reported. "Estimated arrival times range from 2 hours to 6 days. "How many ships?" The officer's voice was strained. "Current count is over 200 confirmed contacts, sir, but the number keeps growing." For the first time since beginning this operation, Zethkri felt a flutter of uncertainty. He had expected to face a few human patrol boats at most. Instead, it seemed like every human ship in the sector was converging on New Geneva. "Maintain bombardment of the planet," he ordered. "We finish this before their main fleet arrives." But even as he spoke, Zethkri could see the tactical situation deteriorating. The human ships were arriving in small groups, but they were coordinating their attacks with surprising effectiveness. The civilian vessels hung back, providing long-range fire support, while the military ships engaged his cruisers directly. Commander Park's destroyer group had arrived and was already causing problems for the Vorthon fleet. His 3 ships were smaller and faster than the alien cruisers, using hit-and-run tactics that kept the larger vessels off balance. On New Geneva itself, the defense was holding. The colonists had fallen back to prepared positions, using their knowledge of the terrain to maximum advantage. Every Vorthon advance was met with carefully planned ambushes. Every attempt to establish a beachhead was frustrated by defenders who seemed to appear from nowhere. What Zethkri still didn't understand was that he hadn't just attacked a human colony. He had attacked Sarah Chen's home, and across human space that distinction was making all the difference in the world. The arrival of Admiral Webb's dreadnought Retribution changed everything. The massive warship dropped out of hyperspace like an avenging angel, its weapons already charging as it oriented toward the Vorthon fleet. Zethkri stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human dreadnought was 3 times the size of his largest cruiser, bristling with more firepower than his entire fleet combined. But what truly shocked him was the ship's approach vector. Instead of hanging back and engaging at long range, the Retribution was burning straight toward his formation at maximum acceleration. "Sir, the human dreadnought is hailing us," his communications officer reported. Put it through. Admiral Webb's face appeared on the screen, and Zethkri immediately understood that he was looking at a very different kind of human than the elderly woman from the planet below. Webb's eyes held a cold fury that made the Vorthan commander's exoskeleton crawl. Commander Zethkri, Webb said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of absolute menace. I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation Navy. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw your fleet from this system. Admiral, you are outnumbered, Zethkri replied, trying to project confidence he no longer felt. I have 12 heavy cruisers. Surrender now, and I will allow your ship to depart safely. Webb's expression didn't change. Commander, you seem to be operating under a misconception. You think this is a negotiation? It isn't. You attacked Admiral Sarah Chen. You threatened human civilians. You have broken the oldest rule in this galaxy. He leaned forward slightly. You made humans angry. The transmission ended, and immediately the Retribution opened fire. Its main guns spoke with a voice like thunder, sending fusion torpedoes screaming across space toward the Vorthon fleet. The first salvo struck Zethkri's flagship, causing massive damage to the ship's forward sections. But the Retribution wasn't fighting alone. As it engaged the Vorthon cruisers, Admiral Torres's carrier group emerged from hyperspace. 4 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyers, and the massive carrier Yorktown took up positions around the system, their fighters already launching. The space around New Geneva became a maelstrom of weapons fire and explosions. Vorthan plasma bolts met human fusion torpedoes in brilliant flashes of light. Fighter craft danced between the larger ships, their pilots pushing their machines to the breaking point. Zethkri watched his carefully planned invasion crumble before his eyes. 3 of his cruisers were already badly damaged, and the human reinforcements kept coming. Every few minutes, another group of ships would arrive, adding their firepower to the growing human fleet. Sir, the Bone Crusher and the Death's Head are requesting permission to withdraw, his tactical officer reported. Denied, Zethkri snarled. We are Vorthan warriors. We do not retreat from soft-skinned humans. But even as he spoke, Zethkri could see the writing on the wall. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. The humans weren't just fighting him. They were dismantling his forces with surgical precision. On the planet below, the Vorthan ground forces were faring even worse. The initial landing had put maybe 3,000 troops on New Geneva's surface, but they were facing an enemy that knew every rock and tree on the planet. Human defenders seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike hard, and then disappear before the Vorthans could respond. Colonel Thompson, the former farmer, was leading a counterattack against a Vorthon stronghold when he received an update from Orbital Command. Sir, this is General Morrison. Admiral Webb's fleet has engaged the Vorthan ships. We're cleared for Operation Hammerfall. Thompson smiled grimly. Hammerfall was something they had hoped never to use. A last resort defensive plan that would turn New Geneva's entire infrastructure into a weapon. Understood, General. All units initiate Hammerfall protocols. Across the planet, mining charges that had been carefully placed in strategic locations began detonating, not to destroy settlements, but to trigger massive landslides and avalanches that would trap the remaining Vorthon forces in isolated pockets. Automated mining equipment, programmed with military targeting systems, began hunting alien soldiers with relentless efficiency. The Vorthans found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but the planet itself. Every piece of technology on New Geneva had been turned against them. Even the weather monitoring stations were firing concentrated microwave bursts at their communications equipment. In space, Admiral Webb was coordinating what had become the largest human fleet action in decades. Ships continued to arrive from across the sector, each one adding to the overwhelming force now arrayed against the Vorthans. Cargo haulers had been converted into missile platforms. Passenger liners carried marine assault teams. Even scientific research vessels had been pressed into service. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthan flagship, his communications officer reported. Put it through. Zethkri appeared on screen again, but now the alien commander looked haggard and desperate. Several of his ship's systems were clearly failing, and Webb could see damage reports scrolling across screens in the background. Admiral Webb, Zethkri began, I propose a ceasefire. We can negotiate terms for— There are no terms, Webb interrupted. You have one option remaining, Commander. Complete withdrawal from this system immediately. Any Vorthan ship that hasn't begun hyperspace jump procedures in the next 60 seconds will be destroyed. Zethkri's mandibles clicked frantically. You cannot simply... 55 seconds, Commander. The Vorthan looked around his bridge at his officers, seeing the same defeat in their eyes that he felt in his hearts. The human fleet now numbered over 300 ships of various types, and more were still arriving. His own force was down to 8 damaged cruisers and no functioning ground troops. 40 seconds. Very well, Zethkri said finally. All Vorthan ships withdraw immediately. Set course for home space, but Admiral Webb wasn't finished. As the surviving Vorthan ships limped toward the hyperspace jump point, he opened a general communication channel that would be received by every vessel in the system, human and alien alike. This message is being broadcast to all ships present, Webb announced. Let the record show that on this date, Vorthan forces launched an unprovoked attack against the human colony of New Geneva. This attack was repelled by combined human forces. He paused, letting his words sink in. Let the galaxy know that humans do not forget. We do not forgive, and we never abandon our own. The broadcast was picked up by observation posts throughout the sector and relayed across the galaxy within hours. But the real message wasn't in Webb's words. It was in the tactical data that accompanied the transmission, showing exactly how quickly and decisively the human response had been. 3 days after the Battle of New Geneva, the true scope of the human response became clear to the galaxy. What had started as a simple colonial defense had transformed into something far more significant. Over 400 human ships now occupied the New Geneva system, representing the largest concentration of Terran forces ever assembled outside of Sol itself. Admiral Hayes arrived aboard her flagship, the massive battleship Constitution, accompanied by 2 full battle groups and a diplomatic contingent. The elderly admiral had come not just to assess the situation, but to send a message to every power in the galaxy. As her ship took position at the center of the growing fleet, Hayes requested a meeting with Sarah Chen. The 2 women met in the conference room of the Constitution, with Admiral Webb and several other senior officers present. Sarah, Hayes said warmly, embracing the older woman. I'm sorry it took us so long to get here. Chen smiled, though she looked tired after 3 days of battle. You got here exactly when you needed to, Catherine. The timing was perfect. Hayes nodded, then her expression grew serious. We need to discuss what happens next. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations. Several member species are claiming we overreacted. Overreacted? Webb interjected. They attacked a civilian colony without provocation. I understand that, Marcus. But we have over 400 ships here now. Some council members are calling it an invasion force. Chen leaned back in her chair, considering. Catherine, how many species do you think really understand what happened here? What do you mean? I mean, do they understand why every human ship in 10 systems dropped everything and came running? Chen gestured toward the viewport where dozens of ships could be seen. Look at that fleet. How many of those captains do you think received direct orders to come here? Hayes frowned. According to my reports, less than 20% were operating under direct military orders. The rest came on their own initiative. Exactly. That's what the galaxy doesn't understand about humans. We don't just follow orders, we follow our conscience. We don't just serve our government, we serve each other. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the fleet's sensor array. Commander Torres, the carrier group leader, appeared on the screen with a puzzled expression. Admirals, we're detecting a large fleet approaching the system. Configuration suggests Altarian origin, but they're flying diplomatic flags. Hayes and Webb exchanged glances. The Altarians were one of the galaxy's most neutral species, serving as mediators in many conflicts. Their presence here was unexpected. Put me through to their lead ship, Hayes ordered. Within minutes, the 3-dimensional hologram of an Altarian delegate materialized in the conference room. The being resembled a crystalline tree, its faceted surface reflecting the room's lights in prismatic patterns. Admiral Hayes, the delegate spoke through a translation device, its voice carrying harmonic overtones. I am Resonance of Deep Waters speaking for the Altarian Collective. We come seeking understanding. Understanding of what, delegate? Understanding of the human response to the Vorthan aggression. Our sensors detected the mobilization of human forces from across multiple sectors. Such coordination without central command is Unprecedented in galactic history, Chen stepped forward. Delegate, may I ask why this interests the Altarian Collective? Because, Honored Elder, the implications are profound. In 3 days, your species assembled a fleet larger than most empires' entire navies. You did this without a formal declaration of war, without central coordination, without even direct communication between many of the responding units. The Altarian paused. Our collective consciousness struggles to comprehend how individual units can act with such unified purpose. Webb smiled grimly. It's simple, Delegate. Someone threatened our family. Family? But the colonists of New Geneva come from many different human worlds, many different backgrounds. All humans are family, Chen said quietly. That's something most species don't understand about us. We may fight among ourselves, we may disagree on politics or religion or philosophy, but when someone threatens any of us, they threaten all of us. The Altarian's crystalline form shifted, indicating deep contemplation. This explains many historical anomalies in human behavior. The rapid response to the Kepler station siege, the overwhelming retaliation against the Zarethan after their attack on the civilian transport Hope's Promise. The galactic community has long wondered how humans achieve such coordination without hierarchical control. Hayes nodded. We protect our own, Delegate. It's that simple. But this raises concerning questions for the galactic order, the Altarian continued. If humans can mobilize such forces so quickly, what prevents your species from becoming a threat to galactic stability? The question hung in the air for a moment. Then Chen laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise the Altarian. Delegate, humans have had the capability to threaten galactic stability for 200 years. We choose not to because we don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be left alone to live our lives. Her expression grew serious. But we will defend those lives no matter what the cost. The Vorthans learned that lesson the hard way, Webb added. Commander Zethkri thought he was attacking a helpless colony. Instead, he found himself facing the combined wrath of humanity. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of the Battle of New Geneva was spreading. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives of hundreds of species were debating the implications. Some called for sanctions against humanity for their disproportionate response. Others argued that the Vorthons had brought the disaster upon themselves. But in the corridors and meeting rooms where real galactic politics took place, a different conversation was happening. Ambassadors who had served for centuries were quietly revising their assessments of human capabilities. Military attachés were updating their tactical estimates. Trade representatives were reconsidering the wisdom of aggressive negotiations with human merchants. The old rule was being rewritten, transformed from superstition into documented fact. Never make humans angry, because humans don't just get angry as individuals. They get angry as a species. On Vorthan Prime, Commander Zethkri faced a military tribunal. His superiors demanded explanations for how a simple colonial conquest had turned into the worst military defeat in Vorthon history. But Zethkri had no answers that would satisfy them. How could he explain that the humans had turned their own planet into a weapon? How could he describe the look in Admiral Webb's eyes? A cold fury that promised destruction for anyone who threatened human civilians. How could he make them understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to abandon each other? The tribunal would eventually strip Zethkri of his rank and exile him to a frontier world. But the damage was already done. Word of the Vorthon defeat spread through their empire like wildfire, undermining the military's reputation for invincibility. 2 weeks after the battle, the real consequences of the Vorthon attack began to ripple through galactic civilization. What started as a local conflict had become a defining moment that would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come. The first sign of change came from an unexpected source. The hegemony of Kresh, a military alliance of 12 warrior species, sent an official delegation to New Geneva. Their message was simple but profound. Formal recognition of humanity as a major galactic power, with all the respect and caution that implied. Admiral Hayes received the Kresh delegation aboard the Constitution, flanked by representatives from several other species who had arrived in the system over the past week. The Kresh war leader, a massive creature resembling an armored bear, spoke through a translation device. "Humans of Terra," the war leader growled, "the hegemony acknowledges your strength. We offer treaty of mutual non-aggression and pledge that no Kresh ships will threaten human space." Hayes studied the alien carefully. The Kresh were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive expansionists who respected only superior force. For them to offer a non-aggression pact was essentially an admission that they considered humanity too dangerous to fight. "We accept your offer, War Leader," Hayes replied formally. "Humanity seeks peace with all species willing to respect our sovereignty." But the Kresh delegation wasn't finished. "We also bring warning. The Vorthan defeat has not been accepted by all their military leaders. Intelligence suggests they are seeking allies for a larger campaign against human space." This was troubling news, but not entirely unexpected. The Vorthan Empire had lost significant face in the attack on New Geneva, and their military culture made it unlikely they would simply accept defeat. Sarah Chen, who had been listening to the exchange from her position as colonial representative, stepped forward. "War Leader, does your intelligence indicate which species might support such an alliance?" "Three possibilities. The Thakari Syndicate seeks to test human resolve. The Zephyrian Dominion believes humans can be beaten with sufficient numbers. Most dangerous is the collective of Zerion, whose hive mind sees humanity as a virus to be eliminated." The assembled delegates stirred uneasily at this information. The species mentioned were all significant military powers, and together they could field fleets numbering in the thousands of ships. Admiral Webb, who had been reviewing tactical data, looked up from his display. "War Leader, what is the hegemony's position if such an alliance forms?" The Kresh War Leader's expression was unreadable behind his armored faceplate, but his answer was clear. "The hegemony will remain neutral. We do not fight wars we cannot win." After the delegation departed, Hayes called an emergency meeting of the senior human commanders. The conference room of the Constitution was crowded with admirals, generals, and diplomatic officials who had gathered in the New Geneva system. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes began, "we're looking at the possibility of a multi-species alliance against humanity. Our intelligence estimates suggest they could field up to 3,000 ships of various classes." General Morrison, who had been coordinating the ground defense of New Geneva, was the first to speak. "Admiral, what's our current fleet strength across all sectors?" "Approximately 1,200 ships of the line, plus support vessels and colonial defense forces," Hayes replied. "We're outnumbered, but not as badly as it might appear." Commander Torres raised her hand. "Ma'am, are we considering a preemptive strike?" "No," Hayes said firmly. "Humanity doesn't start wars, but we need to be prepared for what's coming." The discussion that followed would later be known as the New Geneva Conference, a strategic planning session that would define human military doctrine for decades to come. The assembled officers developed a comprehensive defense strategy that played to humanity's unique strengths. Instead of trying to match the potential enemy fleet ship for ship, the human plan called for a distributed defense using the same principles that had made the response to New Geneva so effective. Every human world would be fortified. Every ship, military or civilian, would be prepared to fight. Most importantly, every human citizen would understand that they were part of the galaxy's most effective military force, a species that refused to surrender. While the conference was taking place, Sarah Chen made a decision that would prove crucial to the coming conflict. She sent a message to every human colony, every space station, every ship captain in the galaxy. The message was simple, but its impact was profound. "To all humans, wherever you may be," she began, "recent events have shown that there are those in the galaxy who mistake our desire for peace as a sign of weakness. They believe that because we choose to live quietly, we have forgotten how to fight. They are wrong." The message continued with detailed information about the potential threat and instructions for each world to begin defensive preparations. But the real power of Chen's words lay in their conclusion. "We are not the largest species in the galaxy. We are not the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, but we are the most stubborn. We do not bow to tyrants. We do not abandon our principles when they become inconvenient. And we do not surrender our freedom to anyone, no matter how many ships they bring." The response to Chen's message was immediate and overwhelming. Across human space, colonies began implementing defensive measures. Merchant ships started carrying military-grade weapons. Research stations became fortified outposts. Even luxury cruise liners were quietly fitted with combat systems. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source: non-human species living in human space. The galaxy contained millions of aliens who had chosen to make their homes among humans, Drawn by the relatively free and open nature of human society, a delegation of these alien residents approached Admiral Hayes with an unprecedented offer. Dr. Vextar, a Altarian scientist who had lived on Earth for 30 years, served as their spokesperson. Admiral Hayes, the crystalline being said, "We who have chosen to live among humans wish to contribute to the defense of our adopted home. We offer our services, our knowledge, and our loyalty to the cause of human freedom." Hayes was visibly moved by the offer. "Dr. Vexitar, you and your people are not obligated to fight in human conflicts. With respect, Admiral, we are not fighting in a human conflict. We are fighting for our home, for our right to choose how we live and who we live among. The species threatening humanity also threaten the principle of individual choice that makes human space a haven for those seeking freedom." The alien volunteers brought with them specialized knowledge and capabilities that would prove invaluable in the coming conflict.
Altarian crystal technology enhanced human sensor arrays.
Zephyrian refugees provided intelligence about their former empire's military capabilities. Even a few reformed Vorthan exiles offered their expertise on Imperial fleet tactics. As preparations accelerated across human space, the galaxy watched with growing unease. What had started as a simple border skirmish was evolving into something that could reshape the entire galactic order. The major powers found themselves forced to choose sides in a conflict they had never wanted. The ancient rule about not making humans angry was about to be tested on a scale never before seen in galactic history. 3 days after the Battle of New Geneva, the true scope of the human response became clear to the galaxy. What had started as a simple colonial defense had transformed into something far more significant. Over 400 human ships now occupied the New Geneva system, representing the largest concentration of Terran forces ever assembled outside of Sol itself. Admiral Hayes arrived aboard her flagship, the massive battleship Constitution, accompanied by 2 full battle groups and a diplomatic contingent. The elderly admiral had come not just to assess the situation, but to send a message to every power in the galaxy. As her ship took position at the center of the growing fleet, Hayes requested a meeting with Sarah Chen. The 2 women met in the conference room of the Constitution, with Admiral Webb and several other senior officers present. "Sarah," Hayes said warmly, embracing the older woman, "I'm sorry it took us so long to get here." Chen smiled, though she looked tired after 3 days of battle. "You got here exactly when you needed to, Catherine. The timing was perfect." Hayes nodded, then her expression grew serious. "We need to discuss what happens next. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations. Several member species are claiming we overreacted." "Overreacted?" Webb interjected. "They attacked a civilian colony without provocation." "I understand that, Marcus. But we have over 400 ships here now. Some council members are calling it an invasion force." Chen leaned back in her chair, considering. "Catherine, how many species do you think really understand what happened here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do they understand why every human ship in 10 systems dropped everything and came running?" Chen gestured toward the viewport where dozens of ships could be seen. "Look at that fleet. How many of those captains do you think received direct orders to come here?" Hayes frowned. "According to my reports, less than 20% were operating under direct military orders. The rest came on their own initiative." "Exactly. That's what the galaxy doesn't understand about humans. We don't just follow orders, we follow our conscience. We don't just serve our government, we serve each other." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the fleet's sensor array. Commander Torres, the carrier group leader, appeared on the screen with a puzzled expression. "Admirals, we're detecting a large fleet approaching the system. Configuration suggests Altarian origin, but they're flying diplomatic flags." Hayes and Webb exchanged glances. The Altarians were one of the galaxy's most neutral species, serving as mediators in many conflicts. Their presence here was unexpected. "Put me through to their lead ship," Hayes ordered. Within minutes, the 3-dimensional hologram of an Altarian delegate materialized in the conference room. The being resembled a crystalline tree, its faceted surface reflecting the room's lights in prismatic patterns. "Admiral Hayes," the delegate spoke through a translation device, its voice carrying harmonic overtones. "I am Resonance of Deep Waters speaking for the Altarian Collective. We come seeking understanding." "Understanding of what, delegate?" "Understanding of the human response to the Vorthon aggression. Our sensors detected the mobilization of human forces from across multiple sectors. Such coordination without central command is unprecedented in galactic history. Chen stepped forward. Delegate, may I ask why this interests the Altarian Collective? Because, Honored Elder, the implications are profound. In 3 days, your species assembled a fleet larger than most empires' entire navies. You did this without a formal declaration of war, without central coordination, without even direct communication between many of the responding units. The Altarian paused. Our collective consciousness struggles to comprehend how individual units can act with such unified purpose. Webb smiled grimly. It's simple, Delegate. Someone threatened our family. Family? But the colonists of New Geneva come from many different human worlds, many different backgrounds. All humans are family, Chen said quietly. That's something most species don't understand about us. We may fight among ourselves, we may disagree on politics or religion or philosophy, but when someone threatens any of us, they threaten all of us. The Altarian's crystalline form shifted, indicating deep contemplation. This explains many historical anomalies in human behavior. The rapid response to the Kepler station siege, the overwhelming retaliation against the Zarethan after their attack on the civilian transport Hope's Promise. The galactic community has long wondered how humans achieve such coordination without hierarchical control. Hayes nodded. We protect our own, Delegate. It's that simple. But this raises concerning questions for the galactic order, the Altarian continued. If humans can mobilize such forces so quickly, what prevents your species from becoming a threat to galactic stability? The question hung in the air for a moment. Then Chen laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise the Altarian. Delegate, humans have had the capability to threaten galactic stability for 200 years. We choose not to because we don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be left alone to live our lives. Her expression grew serious. But we will defend those lives no matter what the cost. The Vorthans learned that lesson the hard way, Webb added. Commander Zethkri thought he was attacking a helpless colony. Instead, he found himself facing the combined wrath of humanity. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of the Battle of New Geneva was spreading. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives of hundreds of species were debating the implications. Some called for sanctions against humanity for their disproportionate response. Others argued that the Vorthons had brought the disaster upon themselves. But in the corridors and meeting rooms where real galactic politics took place, a different conversation was happening. Ambassadors who had served for centuries were quietly revising their assessments of human capabilities. Military attachés were updating their tactical estimates. Trade representatives were reconsidering the wisdom of aggressive negotiations with human merchants. The old rule was being rewritten, transformed from superstition into documented fact. Never make humans angry, because humans don't just get angry as individuals. They get angry as a species. On Vorthan Prime, Commander Zethkri faced a military tribunal. His superiors demanded explanations for how a simple colonial conquest had turned into the worst military defeat in Vorthon history. But Zethkri had no answers that would satisfy them. How could he explain that the humans had turned their own planet into a weapon? How could he describe the look in Admiral Webb's eyes? A cold fury that promised destruction for anyone who threatened human civilians. How could he make them understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to abandon each other? The tribunal would eventually strip Zethkri of his rank and exile him to a frontier world. But the damage was already done. Word of the Vorthon defeat spread through their empire like wildfire, undermining the military's reputation for invincibility.